Okay, so to get started, I'm going to be choosing new map in my data table or spreadsheet. And I'm going to go to my tutorial folder, or sorry, my training folder. And I'm going to be importing the spreadsheet of botanical gardens. And I'm going to right click on this sheet and open it just so everyone can see it. So on this sheet, we have a longitude, a latitude, name, location info, address, city, state, and zip code. You don't need longitude and latitude. You can have them if you want for importing points, but it's not necessary. If you're importing by address, city, state, and zip code, or just address and zip code, we want to make sure that all of these fields, or all of these data is in their own separate fields. So you want the full address in one field with the full street address. Then you want the city in its own field, the state in its own field, and the zip code in its own field. And again, you don't need all of these fields. You can have just some of them if you want, but Maptitude will be more accurate the more information you're able to give it. So I'm gonna open this sheet up and hit OK. Here, we're gonna match up any of our geographic fields from the spreadsheet with their respective matching geography. If you used MapPoint before, you're probably familiar with this. You basically just wanna match up the fields in your data that contains the geographic information, like my address field, with the respective matching geography field on the left side. So basically, you want to make sure that your street address field matches to address, your city field matches to city, your state field matches to state, etc. And coordinates are at the bottom here with X and Y. We're going to be locating the records by address, zip code, or city. This will plot an individual pin on the map for each record of the spreadsheet. If you used MapPoint before, you are probably also familiar with this, which is importing or linking. If you choose to link, you can pick a unique ID field in your spreadsheet. And if you basically make changes to the spreadsheet later and you choose update linked records from the map menu, it will scan your spreadsheet for changes. So you can feel free to link if you'd like. I will be importing here, but linking works pretty much the same as it did at MapPoint. Choose a type of theme. We won't be doing themes in this webinar, but if you do want to use a theme, you can do so here. We will be displaying labels, and I'll label each location with its name. And we won't be doing types of analysis in this webinar, so we will hit finish with none selected. Okay, so all my points are located. And we should get a map with all of those botanical gardens showing, which we do. Okay. So you can move the map around and zoom in and out with the zoom tools here. I won't be going over these in great detail. You can check out the Maptitude Basics webinar if you're interested in how the zoom tools work and some shortcuts you can use. But we can just click on zoom in and click where we want to zoom into to zoom in. In our display manager on the left side, we can find our botanical gardens layer that I just imported. You can check and uncheck this to show and hide it. You can also right click on it and rename it, which I will be doing. And we can change the symbol by clicking on the blue dot next to the layer. Change the color by clicking on this drop down and adjusting the color. I want to make mine purple, and I believe there is a flower. Yes, there is. Perfect. Awesome. Okay. So that's just the basics on changing the style of the layer and renaming it. If you want to export points within an area, you can also do that in Maptitude. So this is a pretty popular feature in MapPoint. If you click on the freehand radius or freehand shape buttons down in the drawing toolbar on the bottom left corner of your screen, you can click where you want the center of the circle to be. So let's say I want to center it at Chicago, and I want a miles. I want a 10-mile circle. It's going to create that 10-mile circle. You can right click on the circle and choose export to Excel to export it. This is going to export all my points within this 10-mile circle. It's also going to give me a demographic report on the 10-mile circle, as well as, I believe, all the distances from those points to the center. Yes, so we get all the points. Oh, this is cities and towns. We get all the botanical gardens that are in this area and their travel time and distance to the center. My units are in kilometers. Yours will probably be in miles if you're using this in the US. The last tab will show us the census overlay of this area. So this shows us things like the estimated household median income of the area, as well as population of different races and age groups. You can remove the freehand shape by right-clicking on it and choosing delete. Next, we'll do the same thing with a freehand shape. This works pretty similarly, but just to draw the freehand shape, you would click once to start drawing, click again to add a corner, click again to add another corner, and continue just clicking wherever you want corners to be. And then when you're ready to close the shape, you would double click. It's going to finish your shape. Then, just like the circle, you can right click on it and choose Export to Excel to get the report. It's going to show us pretty much the same thing we saw for the circle. List of botanical gardens in the area, list of cities and towns in this area, and the census overlay. And again, to delete it, just right click on it and choose delete. You'll see there are also options here for copying, duplicating, and managing which shapes are in front of other shapes. So if you draw multiple shapes on your map, you can rearrange the freehand shapes and duplicate them and such. So all those options are there as well. You can also choose properties to change things like the outline of the shape, the color of the inside, whether or not it's filled, all that stuff. Okay, the next thing I'm going to go over is drive time rings. To create drive time rings, you first have to open up the drive time rings toolbox. You can do that by clicking on either the drive time rings button here on the standard toolbar, or you can go to the tools menu, choose routing and directions, and choose drive time rings. They're going to open up the same toolbox. This is the drive time rings toolbox. It's pretty simple to use. Choose click locations and then click where you want the center of your drive time ring to be. Set the number of rings you want. So this is the number of concentric rings and the number of minutes per ring. So let's say I want 3 rings of 5 minutes. This will give me a ring from 0 to 5, ring from 5 to 10, and a ring from 10 to 15. You can use the click locations to drop multiple points if you want. I don't think we do that in this webinar. We'll go over that in more detail next week when we do the drive time rings webinar. But we can also create drive time rings. Mine's taking a little while because I'm doing it in the middle of Chicago. There we go. So we have the red ring, which is 0 to 5, the orange ring, which is 5 to 10, and the purple ring, which is 10 to 15. If you want a demographic report on this area, you can click Calculate Demographics, and it'll export a demographic report for you. I will do that just to show you what it looks like. If you want to zoom the map to show the drive time rings in the report, you can. And it's going to give us a PDF report as well as a table overlay of the area. So give it a second for the PDF report. There's the PDF report with our demographics in the 0 to 5, 5 to 10, and 10 to 15 ranges. Nice image of the drive time rings. And if you want to export this table to Excel, you can do so with File, Export Table. In general, any data view or table that you have as the active window, so anything that's in the front here, you can export with File, Export Table. And it'll give you the options to export it to Excel. I'm going to close the drive time rings toolbox and not delete my rings. And again, you can toggle on and off layers using the display manager. So if I want to hide my drive time rings, I can click on the check mark here and it's going to hide those rings. The drive time rings are still on the map, they're just hidden. So if I wanted to check them again or show them again, I can check the red X next to drive time rings and they'll pop up again. So the last thing I'm going to do in this webinar is briefly touch on creating territories. To add territories to a map, you're going to go to the map menu and choose new territory layer. You can either create them interactively from a map. So the difference here is you would start from scratch by creating them interactively. You could click on individual areas to add them to territories. Or if you already have a territory table that defines the territories, you can choose from my territory table. If you do choose territory table, you can still add to your territories once they're on the map. It just gives you a place to start at, basically. So I will choose territory table and I'll choose my regions.xlsx here. My territories are built out of zip codes. So I'm going to choose 5-digit zip code as the geography layer and zip as the geography field. My territory table settings, these are the fields in my data that contain the corresponding values for territories. So the territory field is the field that contains the territory names. That is territory. Geography field is the field in my Excel sheet that contains the zip codes, and that is zip. If you have additional attributes in the table, you can copy attributes and add those here. And if you want to track any data in these territories, you can do that in this step. So I can click the plus, add geography layer fields, and add whatever I want. So let's say I want to track population. I can choose population and hit OK, and then finish. Okay, so there's region 1 and region 2. In general, to choose the territory that you want to add areas to, you would pick it from the territory dropdown. So let's say I want to add areas to region 1. I would choose region 1. The select dropdown allows us to choose what types of areas we are allowed to select. So empty areas would be unassigned areas. Any area, meaning I could take areas from other territories. Or if I want to specifically choose areas to remove, I could choose areas to remove. I'll use empty areas and I'll zoom in here to Wisconsin. Toggle on the zip code layer and I'll start clicking a few zip codes. So to click the zip codes, you would choose select by pointing here. Start clicking zip codes. We'll see they get highlighted in red. And to confirm those changes to the territory, you would click the green check mark. And it's going to add all those zip codes. To cancel the changes, you could hit cancel territory changes, and it's going to cancel your changes. If you want to select more than just one zip code at a time, you can use additional tools in this dropdown here. So rather than choosing select by pointing, I choose select by rectangle and draw a rectangle around some zip codes. There's also additional settings in here. You could use select by circle, select by shape, select by line. And if I want to add an entire state or an entire county, I could choose that from the geography dropdown. So let's say I wanted to add the whole state of Wisconsin. I could choose state, switch back to select by pointing and click Wisconsin. It's taking a second because it has to select all the zip codes in Wisconsin. And once it's done that, it's going to show us the result. We can hit the green check mark to save those changes. To export the new territory definitions to Excel, you can right click on a territory and choose export territory list to Excel. And that will give us the full new territory definitions in Excel. So the zip and the respective territory that zip goes into. If you want to export information about just one territory, you can right click a territory and choose export territory to Excel. And this will give us a more detailed breakdown of a single territory. It's going to show us things like all of my botanical gardens that are in the territory, the full geographic definition for that territory, and then we should also get a so botanical gardens in the territory, the geography, and the census overlay. And there's other stuff here as well. things like the population of the territory, any other layers that we have in this territory. So like my drive time rings fell into this territory, so they have their own sheet, and then cities and towns that are in the territory as well. Finally, when you're ready to save your work, you can go to the File menu and choose Save Workspace. So I will call this Maptitude. I'll put it in my training folder. And let's say I've closed my workspace and I've just opened up the software for the first time again. You should see your MapPoint to Maptitude workspace or whatever you've named your workspace in the right side here. You can also double click open an existing workspace and browse for the location where you saved it. The workspaces are a single file, pretty similar to the MapPoint.ptm file. You can, if you have other users of Maptitude at your organization, you can save the file or save your workspace just to any location on your disk, and just either email them that file, the workspace file, or share it with them on a flash drive, put it on a network drive, whatever method you have for sharing files.